Sweden came in the end and rescued him.
Yeah, it was Sweden that got him out of there in the end.
Yes. Yes.
So basically, there is a potential for Belinda Mackenzie to be massively an MI5 agent who is obviously
a possible
a facilitator within the truth movement.
Well,
look at the amount of organisations and little pies that she has her fingers in.
And seemingly with no financial restriction either, which is a big question.
Her income from letting out the spare rooms in her place, and the things she collects for charities and events, which who knows how much that is. Maybe the taxman one day will look into that.
Okay, enough about Belinda. Let's move on. Who do we next need to give serious attention to?
Yeah, well, Pyrite had a very interesting series of conversations with Brian Gerrish and Roger Hayes about the Hollie Greig campaign in particular, and I'd like to read a message from him.
Okay, hold on. Just for 1 second. It's Sarah. You're obviously just saying it's you that's speaking now.
Yeah, it's Sarah
sure.
speaking, but I'm reading from what Pyrite has been saying. So, he says, "Hello, and I'm sorry I'm unavailable for this show. We've always been willing to discuss the evidence and facts of the campaign, and in an effort to do so, we've contacted a number of individuals, including Robert Green, David Icke, Brian Gerrish, Roger Hayes, Ian McFerrin, Belinda Mackenzie, and so on, with all of them completely ignoring us, bar Roger Hayes and Brian Gerrish. Roger was in discussions with myself via email and Skype, and was a very pleasant and rational individual. His last communication to me before his untimely arrest was that he could clearly see things were not as they seemed with the campaign. I'm sure Roger and I would have had further positive conversations had he not been arrested. After exchanging a number of emails with Brian Gerrish, however, it became obvious to us that he was the complete opposite of Roger. Brian refused to answer any of the inconsistencies and anomalies that we have clearly shown regarding the case, and he dismissed the very obvious evidence that we had collated and shown on the website, and that is the HollieGreigCoverup.net, which is a great website filled with information. Brian's irrationality also extended to me personally when I explained to him that I had met Hollie. In so many words, he accused me of being one of those who may have abused her, and then attempted to intimidate me by suggesting that my IP address was very interesting. On many occasions, Brian would state he would refuse to communicate with me because I was anonymous, although Roger Hayes completely understood my concerns. Yet Brian stands shoulder to shoulder with mass supporters of the Hollie Greig campaign and continued to answer every email anyhow. He continues to this day to suggest Hollie was abused by a 22-strong gang of paedophiles over a 14-year period. This would of course result in extreme physical damage. We've discussed that. So we have shown unequivocally that the so-called sheriff is completely innocent. For starters, the sheriff's sisters, named by Hollie, doesn't exist. The sheriff had no sister, or sister-in-law, as Robert Green later suggested. So how can the house where the alleged abuse took place exist?
Now, was this the house where all the abuse was alleged to have taken place, or one of the places?
Most of it.
Okay.
The brother Hollie named as Jack is not the name of the sheriff's brother. The high-ranking police officer accused was a gentleman called Terry Major, and he was nothing more than a civilian employee. More to the point, he was the husband of Sylvia Major, who was also accused as a paedophile, because everyone named allegedly by Hollie just happened to be friends or acquaintances of her mother, Anne Greig. The other children named by Hollie as abuse victims have since released public statements saying not only were they not abused, they'd never even met Hollie until much later in life when Hollie was around 17 years old. And so this is just a snapshot of some of the obvious blatant lies and inconsistencies within the whole campaign. Any rational thinking individual can see the whole case consists of nothing more than a bunch of made up allegations by a vengeful and mentally ill bully. As far as Robert Green is concerned, Anne was introduced to him by Stuart Usher, who has since reiterated to a friend of mine, it looks like Anne has been telling some porkies. It's obvious to all that Robert Green is nothing but a gullible, kind-hearted man, yet because of his ego, he still cannot believe the facts that are in plain view. The whole campaign also suits the anti-state agenda of Brian Gerrish. There's a great deal of corruption within our politics, as we all know, and police force and judicial system. But taking up campaigns like this without doing any investigations to confirm the validity of the evidence simply because it fits with your own agenda is unprofessional, incompetent, and most definitely not in the public interest. No one, not even Robert Green, investigated anything. Roger Hayes admitted to me personally that he'd not had the time to do so, and they all simply believe Anne Greig. Personally, I cannot understand how anyone who has problems with social services would allow such an obviously irrational and unbalanced individual in Brian to see personal and private information on such serious matters. And that is the words of Pyrite. And now I have had some communications with Brian Gerrish myself, and I was always trying to be polite and open to being able to have a further discussion with him, but he, in the end, he quite rudely said, well, don't bother emailing me again, because he just wasn't going to listen.
Yeah. Well, I did myself email Brian Gerrish asking him if we could have a Skype interview, a Skype conversation. He didn't even bother to respond to me. But as you ladies know, I'm not part of that whole truth movement clique, which is why I've kind of realized there could be some truth to this, because my own investigations lead me to believe that several people who fronted this campaign potentially could be co-opted, which is, unfortunate. But, okay, so let's move on.
Well, just to sum up.
Yes.
Roger Hayes did understand that there was something that had to be looked into, but politically, I suppose, he had to, he couldn't come down on either side, and then he was arrested. Now he's out now, and I believe they had a speaking date yesterday evening, and I hope to get in touch with them again to carry on these conversations. But I don't know how, I don't know what's going to come of that, really. Because basically they have to prop each other up, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, one thing about Brian Gerrish is he continually says that Hollie was raped by high-ranking Scottish officials, and I would very much like Brian Gerrish to name them. Because, he says that on videos. I've watched so many videos, that's how I have collated so much information. And on every video he claims that there were 22 high-ranking officials that have raped Hollie or abused Hollie. And I put a challenge out to Brian Gerrish, name them.
Not publicly, you don't have to. You can send the names
them to Mel.
and professions of Mel. Name them.
No,
he just doesn't want to know. I mean, I've spoken to him on the phone as well, and he had a very... he didn't have a very good grasp of all the details.
He's read nothing.
No.
He claims he has all the documentation